Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller here on a Thursday evening. Call-in show edition of the program. I know we're later than normal, 7:40 start. Really closer to 7:41 now at this point. I have stayed late at work. I got other stuff I got to work on. I did not know I was going to be able to get a stream up, but I figured I'd get on here and chat for a few minutes. Not going to be a super long stream because we don't have a ton to get into. Of course, though, if you guys do join the show and want to talk about whatever, you can talk about whatever. Well, this thing can go as long as you guys let it go because it is a call-in edition of the stream here. So if you want to come be a part of the action, we have a link to join the StreamYard in the description of the video, also pinned to the top of the chat. Just click the link, keep the camera off. We'll bring you on stage, and we can talk about whatever. I've only got a couple topics. We had the news of MSU's athletic budget coming out. They made a profit for the first time in several years, which was cool to see, but also kind of a notable note in there about how they're going to be handling some of their revenue distribution going forward, which I think is very important. And then look, this is typically a football show. We tend to focus on football, but there's not a lot of football news right now. MSU basketball has not been one to talk much about. In fact, we've kind of pushed them completely to the back burner for much of the season to this point because there's just not been a lot to discuss. We said we'd get more into some baseball talk, and I'll definitely do that as the season rolls along. But Bulldog basketball deserves some conversation tonight, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Josh Hubbard and his performance and just some of my thoughts moving forward for Mississippi State is, hey, how they going to have to approach things going into the offseason because we're only a few weeks away from that being the case. So we'll get into all that tonight. If you could, leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and have the notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And if you could tell all the Bulldog fans in your life, the Bulldog friends in your life, about what we're doing here at Mississippi State Live, bring them over the channel, have them subscribe, have them tune in, come be a part of the action. Let's continue to grow this channel. I'll start off with the athletic revenue stuff because, frankly, if I don't get into it, I'll probably forget to talk about it. But we get the official financial report from Mississippi State Athletics for the 2025 fiscal year. I know Sam Sklar, the Clarion Ledger, did a good job breaking all of that down over on the CL if you want to check out some of the numbers. And I'm not going to dive into a lot of the numbers. The most notable news is that for the first time since I believe it was 2022, Mississippi State turned a profit, about $200,000 extra coming into the university. Now, a lot of people will talk about, or coming into the athletic department rather, things won't be going into the university much longer. That's kind of the big note to get into. And I know some people saw that and it's like, well, that should never happen. Spend all the money. And obviously, I'm in agreement, right? You don't want to make a profit. You want to continue being able to spend. But I also have to imagine there's probably some level of were they planning to make a revenue in the first place? They were probably shooting to break even when it's all said and done. I guess my camera just froze up on me a bunch. Hopefully that looks fine on the stream. I'd imagine they were shooting to break even to start and then end up making a little bit more money. But, hey, that's more money that they can go into next year working with. Every $200,000 adds up, which we say it like it's no money. Obviously, we're thinking of college athletic mindset where you're dropping $200,000 is what you're spending on an okay starting lineman. I don't know. Maybe not even that. God, you're playing some backups, probably six figures at this point in college sports. But State turned to profit. And I think one of those signs of growth that you've gotten some things working right for you in the athletic department. And I think it's also notable you turn a profit at a time where, Bulldog football, it's not like you're packing out that stadium consistently. I think Bulldog baseball, obviously, that you're always going to get crowds, and baseball didn't turn a profit, but it factors in. You're always going to get massive crowds to the dude, but you're coming off a rough year there. Basketball probably kind of held its own, but you're not getting the impact from women's basketball that maybe you once did. So, finding revenue in other areas and whatever you're doing to get fans involved, whatever you're doing to drive support and get donations into the university, that's a great sign of what Zach Selman has done with the athletic department, as we've talked about extensively. But the big note and the significant thing coming out of this was we heard that this is going to be the final year, or was the final year, that Mississippi State will be taking a portion of its athletic revenue and transferring it back to the university. So that's something State has done for many, many years, that MSU athletics, that, they get their total revenue, and a portion of that has gone back to the university side of things for the university to use however it sees fit, which has been subject to quite a bit of criticism from the fan base, and understandably so, right? For many, many years, this has been a gripe of, like, why are we taking the money that's coming in from athletics and going and putting it into the university? Which I'm sure there's some people out there who are like, who are probably in favor of it, who would say, well, because it's college and it's a university, and you want the university side of things to continue to grow. You want the Mississippi State to be a better university in the academic side, because, hey, that's what it's ultimately all about, right? So I'm sure that perspective it could be there, and that would be the argument, is like, hey, you have this big revenue driver of college athletics. We have an opportunity to better our university in that way. Financially, we need to take advantage of it. I'm sure that's the mindset from State for many, many, many years. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've broken down athletic spending and budgets and any other financial reports for other programs to see, okay, well, how common of a practice is this? I would take a confident guess that Mississippi State was not alone in that practice. I would imagine that there are other power conference athletic departments. I don't know about it within the SEC, maybe, but I would imagine there's other power conference athletic departments that did the same thing, where, hey, we have money coming in from athletics that does need to help our school as well. I'm sure that that's been a practice at other schools. Whether or not that's happening at any programs, that athletic departments that are winning at a high level across several sports, or winning at a high level across the sports that ultimately bring in the money, I don't know, again, because I've not taken the time to look. What I do know is, for Mississippi State, you're talking about an athletic department that has always been behind financially relative to its conference. State might have the smallest athletic budget within the SEC, because Vanderbilt does not have to report these things, so we don't get Vandy's numbers. We also know Vandy has all the money in the world. If they ever wanted to spend it on athletics, they could have, and it kind of seems like they're doing it now. Their basketball, they paid for a very good roster and have now for a couple of seasons. We know baseball, Vanderbilt has always, before NIL, Vandy basically had NIL in baseball because of what they could do from a scholarship standpoint by being a private institution. And then football, Vanderbilt's clearly starting to invest in that. So I'd imagine Vandy's spending quite a bit in athletics. And not that Mississippi State was a small-time athletic department by any means. There's something at a school that's spending well over $100 million per year in athletics. That would be top 40 nationally. But it's towards the bottom of the SEC. I don't know where they are. I think Arkansas is still higher. Missouri is still higher. Ole Miss, I know, is higher. Kentucky, I believe, is higher. So State's down towards the bottom of the league. And that's been the case for a long time. And obviously what you're spending is based off what you have available to you. We know Mississippi State traditionally does not have the same donor base as some of these other programs. And State does not bring in some of the same money. The revenue factors in. Like I said, if State drew a profit this year, that's another $200,000 that gets to go into whatever now moving forward. But other athletic departments that are making more and more and more and more money get to go spend more and more money. As I mentioned, generally the goal has been to break even. Part of the reason these athletic departments have looked to break even for so long is to show, like, well, we can't pay the players. That's the reason you have so many schools that end up in the negative or end up breaking even when it comes to their athletic departments in a given year. It's not that they have to spend all that money. It's not that they have to spend that money to function. It's that they had to spend all that money in order to show that we don't have the money to go to the players, which is something that's finally caught up with them and has been proven to be not the case. But knowing all of this with State and knowing some of the disadvantages that you're at, you do kind of look and say, well, why would you take I think this year was between 4 and 5 million, and that was the lowest it had been in several years. So I don't know where this was at previously, how much they had been giving at a prior point. If you're stating you don't have the same money as some of these other schools, why would you then even further lessen the pot to go back to the university? And look, even if you're going to say that, I'm sure you could point, there probably is a big time college athletic department that very, very successful, makes a ton of money, that gives back to it gives back to the university. I'm just going to guess that one of those is out there. But if it's a school that's making a whole lot more money than Mississippi State and has the more resources than Mississippi State, that doesn't affect them as much. And it kind of feels like if you're Mississippi State, with the limitations that you've had for a long time from a financial standpoint, which, to be fair, Zach Selman is changing a lot of that narrative. I'm not trying to operate with the poor old state mindset here, or operate from a Larry Templeton mindset on Mississippi State, but it's kind of where they've been previously. And there's a whole lot of catching up that has had to happen. A lot of it has, because Zach Selman has done a fantastic job, but you're still working to catch up in those departments. And you're still well behind much of the league. So you're at a disadvantage relative to your peers. Why would you put yourself at a further disadvantage? And even if it's just a few million per year, well, that few million adds up. And I think, if I had to guess, a part of the reasoning for this probably does come back to rev share. Mississippi State is fully funding revenue sharing in college sports. They're doing the 20.5 million of their revenue going directly to its college athletes, which basically any big time college program is doing right now. If you're a power conference program and you're not fully funding rev share, you're basically saying you're not trying to compete in any way, shape, or form moving forward in the sport. And obviously Mississippi State found ways to make that happen. We've seen the State Excellence Fund was created to really push that forward. And that, okay, we have the Bulldog Initiative from the NIL standpoint. State Excellence Fund is how you do this, and it's directly through the university revenue now going back into the players. And you've made a lot of strides with the State Excellence Fund. It's sort of kickstarting that, which, by the way, that 20.5 million number, that's going to go up incrementally year over year. I think it's over 21 for this upcoming season, or upcoming academic year. So you've got to find that money. And I would imagine part of the philosophy here is like, look, that 4 million matters, that 4 or 5 million matters. We can put that towards rev share. And obviously they were already doing that. Now this year they had the full 20.5 million for rev share and still gave, again, between 4 and 5 million back to the university. But what else could you put that 4.5? Let's say we're using that 4 to 5 million now for our rev share. Well, what can we go spend that on elsewhere now? So you're just helping yourself out further moving forward. And to me, it's just another sign of Zach Selman really pushing Mississippi State athletics forward. And I'm not doing all of this to crap on the idea of the university bringing in money and trying to grow the academic side. I want Mississippi State to be a great academic institution. I would love for the university to continue to grow. I want my alma mater to succeed. But simply taking money away from athletics, I don't think is anything that's going to help you in that matter. In fact, what we have seen, the money you would otherwise be using on the university, by putting that into athletics and by having success in athletics, that opens the door for more and more students to be interested in coming to your school, which then opens the door for you to be more selective about the school students that you bring in. You get higher caliber students in, and then that really changes everything about the quality of education at your school. Alabama is the perfect example of this, that the University of Alabama in recent years has become a very, not necessarily a difficult school to get into, but it's not like you can just apply and be anybody and get into Alabama, because Nick Saban changed it, because everybody started wanting to go to Alabama because they wanted to go be a part of a place that had a winning football team. And there's been the influx of, I know the jokes all over SEC Twitter, especially the the burnerverse, which I am not a part of, but I do see plenty of those comments, is like all the Northeast people infiltrating SEC campuses because you get these people from New Jersey, New York that want to come down south for their college years. That doesn't happen if not for athletic success. That's a big part of the reason why. But by getting these out-of-state students, again, you're further increasing the selectiveness that you're able to go with, and you're getting higher caliber of students in. So that's growing the university. You can grow your enrollment. You can get better students on campus, which again is going to lead to, I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about the inner workings of university, but I'd imagine a school that's getting a lot of better students is probably going to attract better professors and better academic programs, I would think. So you can grow your school through athletics. And to me, that if you're Mississippi State, you just invest in athletics as much as possible, and you continue any money that you can put into it, you do, and make sure you are as strong as possible in that department. That's got to be the approach that Mississippi State takes. I think Zach Selman is the guy that has really done a lot of convincing to a lot of people around Starkville. I know it's not my sources because I don't have sources. It's just listening to other people who are connected have said on multiple occasions Zach Selman has ruffled feathers in Starkville during his tenure because you had a lot of people that were comfortable doing things a certain way, that this is just how we function here, that Selman, being an outside voice who has been a part of one of the most successful athletic departments that there is in the University of Oklahoma, can step in and say, no, this is how we need to function here if we're going to make this be as good as it could possibly be. So it comes across as a minor detail that, like, hey, State's not going to be giving money back to the university from the athletic department moving forward. But I think it's another great sign of more and more growth for Mississippi State. Another good job from Zach Selman. Credit to Mark Keenum for being willing to do this. Obviously, as the university president, he has the final say in a lot of this. And he's been the one who's caught a lot of the flack over the years for that being in place to begin with. That money was going from the athletic department into the university. More money going towards Bulldog sports is the best thing that can happen for Mississippi State. So it's a really good move for the Bulldogs. Let's talk some basketball here. Mississippi State gets the win over Auburn, 91-85. Josh Hubbard, man. I think I put this on my Facebook page. I feel blessed that as a fan, I've gotten to watch Josh Hubbard. Mississippi State fandom is something we are often cynical about. We all love the university. We all love our Bulldogs and love the athletic department, or love the teams, rather. Although I do love the athletic department right now. It's just speaking very lowly of them. We all love our school and our teams, but we tend to be cynical because the reality is it's been a lot of heartbreak over the years and been a lot of frustrating moments over the years, times where you're like, why on earth do I do this to myself? Why did I choose to be a fan of this godforsaken school that loses in everything? And to be fair, right now, men's basketball as a whole is not helping that case. Even after this win, they're 13-13 of the season, 5-8 in the SEC. I mean, look, we've known for a while they're not going to be an NCAA tournament team. At this point, NIT could happen, which, given where this team was at, making a run to the NIT would be a good sign. Maybe you get some momentum, especially if some young guys can perform well in the postseason. But it's not the season that you were expecting. And look, the last couple of years, right? I think that the last 2 years, you've had pretty high expectations for that team. They were tournament teams the last 2 years. They were single-digit seeds the last 2 years. But losing conference records, one and done in the tournament. You didn't have the strong regular season. You didn't have the postseason run to really hang your hat on with teams that probably should have been good enough to do a little bit more, right? So there's some frustrations with where you've been, especially with where you're currently at. I say all that to say it is a blessing to get to watch Josh Hubbard wear the maroon and white. He is, I think he is the most special athlete that I've watched in my time as a fan. And I'm a younger fan. started closely following Bulldog football around 2012, Bulldog basketball a few years later, Bulldog baseball a couple years before. I think the 2013 College World Series was the first time I really, or postseason run leading up to that was sort of the first time I really kept up with Bulldog baseball. But I know the 2016 SEC championship team, that was the first one that like throughout the season I was watching that team. So I've been doing this a little over a decade now as a fan. So I've not seen some of the guys that a lot of you have seen, but I know that there's people who have seen a lot of those players that have said sort of the same things about Hubbard. And, obviously like I had Dak's whole career. I had Jake Mangum's whole career. Hey, on the hardwood, Quindary Weatherspoon, incredible career for him that's going to go overlooked because of the lack of team success. But one great player, Brent Rooker, Tanner Allen. So State's had some guys. Football's not really had the superstars so much. Unfortunately, you've had a few really, really good players, but Dak is sort of the one truly superstar. Just in terms of Jeff Simmons is as dominant as any player to ever come through Bulldog football. But I don't know if he was a college football star in the way that Dak Prescott became one. Josh Hubbard is a star. Josh Hubbard is one of the best players in college basketball. And Josh Hubbard does things that you just don't see all that often. Watching his ability to score the basketball, watching him when he gets hot, it's unlike anything I've seen before. And it's just a truly incredible experience as a fan. I was just laughing last night as he starts hitting some of those shots. All I could do was laugh. I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And it's just funny in just in a way of being awe-inspired or just, I guess, being in total awe. It was insane watching that and seeing the performance that he ultimately was able to put together. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, man, getting to say that you saw a player of that caliber who did things like Josh Hubbard did. And I mean, look, 46 points, one shy of the school record. I hate that they did not draw up an inbound play to get him the ball. I understand, in that moment, I think you were up 4 when you could have done it. You don't want to technically be chasing a number there, but it's like Hubbard's. He's not been as good at the free throw line this year, but that's still the guy that you would trust the most at the line anyway. Like let him go hit a couple free throws to set a school record. Did tie the school record though for SEC points or points in an SEC game at 46. Also tied Bailey Howell, who holds the record 47, set a school record for made threes in the game with 10. I mean, carried the team, put the Bulldogs on his back, and he's had performances like this before where he's been truly outstanding. Obviously, this is 3 straight 30-point games now. But you look back, I mean, a lot of Hubbard's big games, the 2 games that always stand out where he was kind of like, trying to do everything, will Mississippi State to a win. His freshman year against Kentucky and then his sophomore year against Alabama, where both games, Josh Hubbard literally does everything in his power for Mississippi State to win those basketball games. And both times it's heartbreak. Kentucky, Reed Shepherd happens. Alabama, Keyshawn Murphy happens. That's a fun name to bring up right now. But having these all-time performances, not being able to get the win, you get it in this game. And it's not quite the same because Auburn is now a middling team that might not go to the tournament. They are still a tournament team if the season ended today. Their profile is there, but they got to win some basketball games down the stretch. It's not the same as playing a team ranked in the top 10 or whatever, or wherever those teams are ranked that is going to be a highly seeded team in front of a crazy raucous atmosphere. That's the other thing that sucks is that this didn't get to be because of the way the season's played out. Josh Hubbard has that game in kind of a half-empty hump, an energized half-empty hump. Credit to the fans that were there and creating a great atmosphere. But he gets to have that big performance and gets it done. And the fact that second half, Auburn is doing everything in their power to double team him, and he's just not getting opportunities. When he does get shots, he missed a couple, had a couple of decent looks, just didn't fall for him. And it's like, oh man, I guess he's just kind of out of gas. And then he gets essentially the game winner and just drills it for his 10th 3 of the night. 9 rebounds for the guy. Had a few assists, 3 assists, believe. 3 assists, a couple of steals, didn't turn the basketball over. The fact he was State's leading rebounder is incredible. And I know some, with Josh being the leading rebounder, a lot of that is, Auburn was just sort of missing shots that were ricocheting. But, career high in rebounding. It was the best performance of his career, not even close. He was outscoring Auburn at the half. That's the thing. I haven't even talked about the fact that he had 35 points at halftime. I have not seen a guy put together a performance of that caliber. I know Brian Haydad was talking about some of them, and the Bednar in the College World Series is up there for sure, especially when you get to the stage. But in terms of just individual putting the team on your back, I mean that's the other thing. And Bednar will probably always stand alone because it's leads you to a national championship, and it's Omaha. But it's not like he was all on his own doing that. You have a ton of other talent on the team. Mississippi State doesn't have anybody else. It's the Josh Hubbard show. And if Josh Hubbard does not have a big game, Mississippi State doesn't have a chance. And this was Hubbard really had to do it all on his own because just nobody else was there. Sean Jones had a good game. Jaden Epps, not a great shooting night for him overall, but made some big buckets in the second half. 3 of 6 from 3 was good for him. 2 of 4 from 3 for Sean Jones, 4 of 6 shooting. 5 assists for Sean Jones, by the way, which was cool to see for him. State protected the basketball well. But Hubbard had to do it all. He really had to do it all. And he finally had that one game where it's like he showed, I can put them on the back and I can will them to a win, which is just a truly remarkable feat, especially when you're going up against a team opposite of you that, was on a losing streak, was struggling, but still has a lot more talent. It's an Auburn team that has a win over St. John's. It's an Auburn team that went on the road and beat Florida. So it's just I can't say enough great things about Hubbard and just how blessed we are to have gotten to watch him. And I guess we'll get to more of that here just in a sec. But I do want to add, the Keyshawn Murphy thing, that does make it all the more sweet. And buddy, you go 1 for 7 in your return, tough. I know he rebounded well. He had a couple nice blocks, and he got to the free throw line some, which the free throw discrepancy was – I understand Auburn was getting to the basket more than State was, and that's part of it. That plays a pretty big role there. But my goodness. State, 17 free throw attempts, 31 for Auburn. But keep in mind, State, 6 of those free throw attempts are at the end of the game. When they're being fouled. So 11 in actual game time. And a lot of those calls were ticky-tack. And look, now to be fair, State was also doing a piss-poor job of rebounding. They were kind of getting physically dominated inside, which is Auburn just kept missing shots, and it kind of bailed them out. It's a crazy game. State's up 18 early in the second half. Auburn storms up to take a 7-point lead with under 4 to go, and then you find a way to get it done. It looked like you were going to waste it away. And Chris Jan said in the postgame, that would have been a real shame if you had wasted, and Jan's used the line wasted that performance, because that's what it would have been. And State's wasted some big games from Hubbard before. Maybe I would say wasted. The Alabama one especially, because the certain guy on the Auburn team missed a wide open layup to win the game. But a wild game, Josh Hubbard carries you to win. Getting it over Keyshawn Murphy is all the more sweet. And look, I was a huge fan of Murph when he was at State. He was a player that I the way he moved on the court, I enjoyed. He's always just been a guy I've looked at there's a physicality to him. The way I always talk about it, he was the only guy State had on the roster last year that you would see those spurts where he would move like an NBA player moves. And he has the frame that an NBA player has. He doesn't have the shooting ability or the handles of an NBA player. But he has those moments where you look at him and it's like, yeah, this guy, if you put it all together, the makeup is there for something really special. The guy on the team I look at now for State, and he did not have a good game this last one, didn't even attempt a shot, but Sergei Masura, I think, could develop into that down the line. But I was a big fan of Murph. It's also no secret that like he looked to get out multiple times. He hit the portal on at least once before he ultimately did leave. He had the time that he stepped away from the team, and it was kind of a whole thing like keeping him honed in, and it finally like culminates in his junior year. It's so weird. He didn't start more than like a couple games that season. He came off the bench basically the entire year, but ends up being the second best scoring threat the Bulldogs had. I can't say second best player because that was Mook. Cam Matthews was the second best player on that team behind Hubbard. But Murphy was number 3, and Murphy was your second best scorer on that team. And a huge part, a guy that if you had brought him back, I mean, if you have Keyshawn Murphy on this team, think about your struggles you've had in the post. I mean, that would help a lot. And maybe you're talking about having a couple more wins right now. And I think just a couple more wins, State would still be on the wrong side of the bubble, but you could at least be going to this final stretch of the season, saying like, hey, they got a chance. So like, it was disappointing to lose him, but it was also disappointing. Like, okay, man, like we put up with this, for multiple years. Like you finally get an opportunity. Like you finally basically showed, oh, I'm good enough to play at other schools, and I'm going to immediately bounce elsewhere. Like that's the most frustrating part of it. Is it's Xavier Thomas-esque, and that you've made it very clear this is not where you want to be, but you just weren't going to get the opportunities you thought you were. So you reluctantly stay at Mississippi State until you finally show, yeah, no, I am good enough. Like Xavier Thomas tries to leave Mississippi State before the 2023 season. He ultimately chooses to come back and play that year out, and had like 500 yards for the Bulldogs, and with the number 2 receiver on that team, showed a lot of potential. It's like, okay, now LSU's willing to take you, so I'm gone. Keyshawn Murphy, like a guy who'd shown a couple flashes, had a couple decent games, but it had mostly been a guy getting a few minutes per game, never put it together. Finally, he's a key piece. We need you to go and contribute. He has a big year. Okay, I got the opportunity to go to Auburn. I'm going to Auburn. Go back to my home state. And like both those guys wanted to go back and play in their home states, and I guess you can't necessarily fault guys for that, but it's a frustrating thing when you've got the guy that's very clearly not wanting to be a part of the program, who the first opportunity he gets to bolt, he's gone. Like that, it stings and it's annoying. And I mean, he takes that shot when State took the loss early in the season. I guess it was after the New Mexico loss that he tweets out, war damn Eagle with the winking emoji. What is that for? Like, what do you feel the need to troll for? Like, I understand. I'm sure his thing will fans were getting on me. Like, it's still, you got old teammates. I don't like, did Hubbard and Jones do you wrong? Did Chris Jans do you wrong? Chris Jans, from as far as I can tell, like, put up with a lot of crap to keep you around. So he does that stupid trolling, but it's been very funny. It's like he's expecting to go play for Bruce Pearl, expecting to play for a character, but one of the best coaches in college basketball, and play for a team that's going to be an SEC contender. And instead he gets Stephen Pearl and a roster that's just been kind of inconsistent throughout the year and now might miss the tournament. Like I said, Auburn right now would still be a tournament team. They have like the number 1 strength of schedule in the country. They have not taken a single bad loss. They have multiple really, really good wins. Their metrics are all solid. They would be a tournament team right now, but there's a certain record you have to hit. And with 14 games, they basically need to get to 18 wins. They could probably be 17 regular season, win 1 game in the SEC tournament and be okay. Alabama did that a few years back. Michigan did that a few years back. But yeah, like their schedule is not like crazy easy the rest of the way. Like, and if they're losing to Mississippi State, they could lose to these other teams. I'm going to laugh if Auburn ends up missing the tournament. And look, Murphy's had an okay season. He's been a starter for them. He's averaging like 11-7, which is basically what he averaged for State last year. He's had a fine year, but it was really nice to see. And I mean, like, again, 1 for 7 from the floor, an embarrassing missed dunk. He was trying so hard to slam it home and shove it in Mississippi State fans' faces, and for it to blow up in his face, he's jawing at the crowd. I don't remember what he was, some sort of a hand sign at him. I don't remember what he was doing. It was really good to see. And then obviously Hubbard at the end giving him the "you don't leave State." That was a beautiful, beautiful sight. And I love seeing that side of Hubbard, like when Josh gets fired up, but you almost never see it fired up towards anybody else. You've always sort of seen Josh like he's just individually like, I'm him. This was, we're getting at you. And they made that boy dog food. And you love to see that. On Hubbard, I mean, and moving forward, and I'll just close out with this. I'm surprised I've gone 36 minutes at this point. The disheartening thing, and I've seen this from a few people, and they're spot on. It is really tough and frankly unacceptable that you've gotten this Josh Hubbard and you're a 13-13 basketball team. To have one of the best players in college basketball and not even be in contention to go to the tournament, that's bad. And I'm not saying it hasn't happened. Other teams, I'm sure you can find examples. I know there's been a lot of guys who went on to be lottery picks in the draft that didn't do anything at the college level. Although sometimes guys, just because a guy's about to be a lottery pick doesn't mean he's just this dominant force in college. But when you have a player of Josh Hubbard's caliber, like, you have to put the pieces around him. And I've largely been a Chris Jan's defender. I certainly don't think he should be fired this year, even if they lose out the rest of the way. I don't think Chris Jan should be fired. I do believe he has earned a fifth season in Starkville based on the overall body of work, which, as I've said, I get it. Last couple of years were still not quite as good as they probably should have been either. But historically speaking, 20 wins in NCAA tournaments in each of your first 3 seasons is far better than you typically get in Starkville. And odds are you're not going to find a lot of other coaches that step in and do that. I'm not saying there aren't coaches out there you could hire who could do it. There absolutely are. I'm saying that the chances of you finding a guy who's going to do it based on what you've shown historically is slim. So he gets a year to figure this thing out. But to have not put a good enough roster around Hubbard this year, it's a failure. And it's a bad look. And I know it's a portal class that on paper, all the guys we looked at, there was a good bit of excitement. And, you thought this was going to be a much better group than it ended up being. I'm old takes exposed me all day. Go ahead. I said on paper, this is like the deepest roster Jans has had. And what I was getting at was I thought it was a good group of portal players plus a really talented freshman group that could step in and contribute. And, I did say in that comment, I don't know if this is the best core he has had. When you talk about like the nucleus of the team, guys, when you've had Hubbard alongside either a Tolu or a Keyshawn Murphy and then Mook mixed in, like, yeah, that's a stronger core that you're building around than what you're going to have this year. But I thought top to bottom, you had a better group in place. Very clearly wrong on that. Because look, you just missed on a lot of these portal pieces, and you thought you had enough talent in place. You struck out, and it's missed evaluations, and it's something that's got to be fixed because this whole you just cannot have a player like Josh Hubbard forming like he is, and you don't put the talent around him. It's cut and dry as that. And we look back, and it's like, yeah, almost every single one of these guys you brought in, there was some level of like uncertainty with it. Jaden Epps has been a starting caliber player. Jaden Epps is also the same player he's been his entire career, which is a guy that's got an incredibly high ceiling, a very low floor. Most of the time, just solid starter, decent to good player. That's what you're usually getting from Jaden Epps. But you also get some wild swings with him. And State has seen both ends of that over the course of the season. But Jaden Epps, you got what you got. But if you were expecting to bring a guy in who could be that consistent threat every single night, that's technically not what Jaden Epps has been throughout his career. Jabari McGee was a solid starter in the American Conference. So now he comes in and he's a solid role player in the SEC. Achor was a really good player at Samford, but why did things go poorly at Kansas State? Now, I know that there was more, I guess that was a locker room, off the court type thing. I don't know for sure, but because he really didn't even play. But there was a red flag there, and it's still a guy who had not proven it at this level. And what we've seen is he's been better in SEC play, but he's kind of just a solid, he's more of a rotational type guy. He's not a guy that you want starting, and yet he has to start for State. Amir Ali doesn't touch the floor. And that's a guy that there was a lot of excitement about, but Amir Ali had never done it in college. He had, but he had shown flashes. It was a young guy who had shown flashes in Arizona State. Now he's going to step into a bigger role and be a big-time player. But it wasn't proven. Oddly enough, the guy that I think there was the most, like you would have felt most confident in was Quincy Ballard. Because Ballard had 2 years in college basketball of being a really good old school big. Like, no, he's not going to be a big-time scoring threat most nights, but he can get you 8 to 10. He's going to do that at a high rate. He's going to defend. He's going to rebound and just be a good physical presence down low. And, obviously coming from the American Conference. So it's like, okay, well, can he do it night in, night out in the SEC? Clearly, hindsight is he can't. But at Wichita State, he played a bunch of power conference teams and played well in those games. So, that's one where, look, I don't fault Chris Jans for taking him, but clearly you whiffed, right? He's been the biggest miss of all of them. Amir Ali notwithstanding, whatever the issue is there. But you went basically over in the portal. I'll call Epps a hit because you got exactly what you were expecting to get there. Epps is a good enough player to start. It's just there's the wild inconsistencies with him. The other 4 guys, you did not hit on them at the rate that you needed to in a year where you had to hit on those positions. And you get Josh Hubbard in the best version of him that he has ever been, and you're a 500 team now with about a week to go till March. That can't happen. And I think you've got to go into next year now. What I said is State cannot take a portal approach of going out and getting solid players or guys with potential. It's got to be you're going to getting guys who are certified studs, which means you're going to have to pay. And I don't know what State's spending is. I think the word is State spent around $10 million on the roster, which is kind of the baseline in the SEC of like, okay, if you're going to field a competitive team, you better be spending at least $10 million on your basketball roster. I think State was sort of in that range. You got to find a way to up that. Because obviously, one, you got to pay to hold on to Hubbard. And I do want to be clear because I don't want to suggest that I think Hubbard's going to jump. He has made it very clear at this point in his career he wants to be a Bulldog. He wants to continue representing his state. It's not like other schools haven't come calling. And I'm sure, like, obviously, you can't not pay him if you're Mississippi State, right? Mississippi State, I'm confident, is giving him – they're taking care of him. I'm sure of it. But I'd imagine there's probably schools out there that offer more. But they're making sure, okay, I don't think Josh is a chase the money type guy. So but you're going to probably have to pay him more because he deserves it. But there is the part of like, hey, man, he's going into his final year. Unless something happens with the NBA. I don't want to completely like not put out the idea that maybe he shows enough that he could get drafted and be ready to go. And if that happens for him, like, hey, man, best of luck. Thank you for an awesome 3 years. But, I think Hubbard's a guy most of us, because of his stature, because of, the defense, you're imagining like, all right, he's probably a guy that's going to be a 4-year college player. And then, whatever he does in pro ball, we'll see. It's going to be it for him. And I have to imagine like he's a guy that knows he could go play for a championship contending team. He could go start for a championship contending team. And again, I'm not trying to put myself in Hubbard's shoes and suggest that he's going to bolt. That's not what I'm doing. I think everything he's shown to this point suggests that he wants to be here. In fact, the fact that he was saying you don't leave State, that would be a weird look if he were to leave State. I don't think it's going to happen. But I think if you're State, you better show him like, hey man, we are building this around you. We're going to set you up for success. which I imagine they thought they were selling this year, but it just didn't click. It didn't click when it was all said and done. You didn't land. You whiffed on the portal guys you brought in, and you didn't bring in a single guy that you knew 100% that guy is a big-time addition who's going to thrive. Again, I think a lot of us were really high on Quincy Ballard. A lot of us were high on Epps as well. But you go 1 for 2 there. And the one you missed on was probably the more damaging one, all things considered. I think if you hit on Ballard, even if Epps wasn't all that great, you might be better off right now because at least you'd be playing better defense and you'd be able to rebound better and you'd have more scoring down low. But you've got to spend to go get some top-end guys. There's going to be some top-end guys hit the portal who are proven players, and whatever it takes to get them on campus, you got to. I don't know where that money that you were going to give to Jordan Seaton went or what the plan is there. Buddy, I'd put it to men's basketball. You have a generational talent leading your basketball team. You set him up to be as successful as possible. You build a roster that's set to go and compete within the SEC next year and can go make a deep run in March. That's got to be the approach you take when it comes to how you handle your roster for next season. And I mean, look, you got some young guys that are intriguing. I know the last few games you've not gotten as much from it's that trio of Jamar, Grace, and Serge. You've not gotten as much out of that group. I don't know if it's sort of they're hitting the wall. I don't know if it's other guys starting to play a little bit better and sort of retake those roles. But those guys have all shown flashes where you believe, hey, they can take another step forward. And, what can T. Bartlett give you next year? If Cameron Paul, if he's healthy, what can he give you next year? You have another very talented signing class come in. There's going to be a lot of young, intriguing talent. But you still, assuming you got Hubbard as the leader, you got to put 2 to 3 guys at least around him that you would say, yeah, all right. Because, look, you're losing a lot of the guys you brought in. You're going to have to, like, I know they love what they have in Jamar. I still think you probably need to go out and get a proven center. You're going to have to go out and get a guard. You got to go get a wing for sure. Like, those would be the 3 spots for me. Because, look, if you get a proven center, maybe you play Jamar 4 at the 4. That's a possibility. Obviously, I guess at the 4, you would like to have a little bit more scoring. But to be fair, Cam Matthews almost was not going to be that guy at the score, and you wanted him out there because of what he brought from a defense or rebounding standpoint. But yeah, man, they're going to need at least, I would say, 2 truly great transfers and then 1 or 2 more guys that okay, either good rotational pieces. That's got to be what you do in the portal, along with, holding on to Hubbard and then the young guys on the roster that you're going to want to pay to keep. Got to be the approach. You're going into Josh Hubbard's senior year. If you do not have a good team for Josh Hubbard's senior year, like we talked about, Chris Jans gets a pass for this year, and next year sort of make or break whatever. I don't think Chris Jans with a senior Josh Hubbard not going to the NCAA tournament, I don't think he can keep a job. Screw win a record NIT. I don't think you can hold on to him. I don't think you can justify keeping him. So, man, they cannot let what happened. They've got to go all in to make basketball, build that roster for next year. You have this special talent. Put the pieces around him to go succeed. You failed at doing it this year. You were very iffy at doing it last year. To be honest, they did a better job last year, but last year, what ultimately led to that team being successful? You still had Cam Matthews, and then Keyshawn Murphy stepped up. It was still the guys that were on campus that are the reason last year's team was good enough to be a tournament team. Ultimately. Jans' portal evaluations, it's not been great. Keep in mind, I mean, his first year, most of that team are guys he inherited. He didn't bring in a big portal class right away. Year 2, brought a ton of guys back. The one big portal addition they went to make was Andrew Taylor, who you flopped on completely. Guy played 2 games. And then last year, you had to bring in a bigger portal class. All of those guys became role players. You didn't have a single guy come in that was a consistent, strong player for you over the course of the entire season when you had to bring a bunch of guys in. And then this year, you only had Hubbard back, and you had to bring in guys to come in and be starters, and it just didn't work out. Look, Chris Jans has talked a lot about building a roster year by year and taking advantage of the portal, and that's something that he's done previously, especially at New Mexico State. Hasn't really shown it at Mississippi State. Has not really shown that yet. So, I hate to be looking ahead to next year already, but that's where we're at. You have a talent like Josh Hubbard, you have to maximize him. But look, some momentum for men's basketball, back-to-back wins. Obviously got the win in Oxford back over the weekend. They get South Carolina this weekend. I don't want to assume anything with this team, but look, it'd be a great chance to get it to 3 straight wins, get a winning record. With where this team was at, to have a winning record at this point, that would be a fun place to be. I mean, look, down the stretch, it's going to be tough for them to win more than a couple more games, right? You would think they'll get South Carolina, but look, it's on the road and could be a letdown spot for sure. But then it's at Alabama, Missouri at home. They could win that game, but Missouri's hot right now. At Florida, going to be very brutally tough, and then Georgia at home. Another game I was like, they could win it, but that's going to be tough. Georgia's a good basketball team. So, it could be they get a win over South Carolina and then go 0-4 the rest of the way. That's entirely possible. But look, I would say if you can get a couple more wins here down the stretch, that'd be you would take that at this point. It's always funny with me that I say I'm not going to do a long stream and then I go close to an hour. I just hit the 52-minute mark. I mean, I ramble. You guys know that. Tonight I was basically rambling nobody. Really nobody in the stream, which, hey, I know, weird time Thursday nights. What happened with women's basketball? Did that go final? Oh, my God. Yeah, so MSU women's basketball is getting run off the court to close out the game, 71-55 here at the end of the fourth quarter against a 15-win Florida team. A game State basically needed to win if they're going to be a tournament team. That's a tough loss for Sam Purcell. Look, Purcell was dealt a rough roster situation this year, and the fact that he, in terms of players lost, obviously bringing in an incredibly young, talented group of players who have contributed this year, but how much can you count on freshmen right away? And then with the guy piece they lost in the portal and out of the portal, didn't go get a bunch of superstars. Done an incredible job to have a team that's got a chance to make the tournament at this point right now would be in, although this loss is going to be damaging. It's been a great coaching job, but the ups and downs of Purcell's career, to lose this game to Florida, that's a tough look. They're going to have to scramble to be a tournament team now. That's disappointing. Not been the year you were hoping for Mississippi State hoops. Obviously, the women's still in a much better position than the men are, and that the women could still go to the tournament, the men can't. But that's rough. All right, so we'll be back Monday. I guess we'll continue some positional preview talk, start talking about the Bulldog running back room. It got us some of the thoughts for that group. And if there's any other news, notes to get into, other topics I want to dive into, we'll do that as well. Appreciate all y'all out there. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Have the notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And as always, swing your sword